So we're all squared away then?
All good, thank you. Hello. Okay. So you may take one of the other two. All right, cool.
So, how you want to go first, Noor, and then?
This is Ralph Rensler, director of the Smithsonian Bicentennial Folklife Festival. If you enjoyed the festival, you'll be interested in this invitation.
Ladies and gentlemen, an opportunity like this cannot be taken for granted.
This evening, we are going to be beating our hearts out for you all, so I want to see people enjoying themselves. So get up and feel the music and do something about it, okay?
This event is a right of cultural democracy.
We have many, many partners, you included. I encourage you to stand alongside with us as we travel this journey year after year.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. We are beginning an incredible session on the emerging arts and culture scene in the UAE. I am Professor Woodman. You can call me Professor Woodman. I've taught in the UAE for 10 years, and the amazing experience has been to see the arts and culture scene just explode in the UAE. So we have two leading individuals, Lisa Ba Lesher from Tashkeel Art Center, and also Noor Suwaidi, who's an artist and curator that will be with us. But first, I just want to introduce the whole Arts Festival. Welcome to the 2022 Smithsonian Folklife Festival, produced by the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage, co-presented by the UAE Embassy, thanks so much, and co-sponsored by the National Park Service, who takes care of this, a beautiful lawn of ours, I mean the mall, right? For over 50 years, can you imagine 50 years, the festival has convened people on the National Mall to explore, exchange, and engage the power of culture and creativity in our lives today, okay? This year, in addition to the UAE, we also feature Earth Optimism. Have you been to that side? They have incredible programs. We need to be optimistic about our future, especially in these darkening days, yeah. Make sure to check out both programs in our marketplace at the front of the National Museum of Asian Art, and add to your festival stories to ours by using the hashtag 2022 Folklife. This festival is made possible by the people like you. Visit festival.si.edu to join our community of contributors. We also receive federally appropriated funds. Thank you, Congress. Yeah. Smithsonian Trust funds, contributions from governments, business foundations, and individuals, in-kind assistance, and food, recording, and craft sales. This year, additional support, thank you so much, is provided by the Timashiv Family Foundation. Promotional support is provided by the UAE Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. What a beautiful idea. The UAE Ministry of Culture and Youth, with our amazing Minister, Noor Al-Kabi, who's also my president at Zayed National University, and the UAE Embassy in Washington. Additional support was provided by Etihad Airlines. Now, in terms of accessibility, the festival strives to maintain an accessible and inclusive environment for visitors of all abilities. If you are in need of accessible seating options or assistive listening during this presentation, please see our venue manager, who has a big button that says Ask Me. For assistance, detailed accessibility information about all of our festival accessibility, including ASL interpretation, audio description, real-time captioning, and a variety of other services, can be found at our festival website or visiting accessibility information table, which is located behind this wall. Now, we also are hoping that Shadi Magala will come to us on the screen all the way from Dubai, who actually has founded the first vinyl record store in I don't know, West Asia, UAE. He is amazing, so, and a dear, dear friend. So we hope that he will join us. But without further ado, let's welcome our speakers. And I'm going to suggest that, that as a sort of introduction, that both of them describe how they got involved in this incredible creative industries and culture scene in the UAE, which has emerged. Well, it's not just emerging, it's emerged. Lisa, please. Sure.
It's definitely has emerged. So I've been working in the Middle East, North Africa, on and off since I was 19 and in theatre companies. I worked my way round. I did a little bit of a stint back in the UK, and then I ended up in Lebanon. I was running a centre for contemporary arts in Beirut, and unfortunately on February the 14th, 2004, there was an assassination of Prime Minister Rafik Hariri. I was 5 minutes away from that site. I was heading to that very area for work, and after that it was very difficult to live in Beirut, not just as an expat, but just anyone. And a lot of people who were born and bred in Beirut upped and went to the Gulf. Because it provides stability, it provides security. And at that time, back in 2005, there was a very exciting feeling in the art scene. And I had a job as the first full-time editor for the very first art magazine for the Middle East and Arab world, Canvas.
And that's how we met, actually.
That's how we met. That's how we became sisters. Since then, I've worked in editing and publishing. I've written a number of books on Middle Eastern, particularly Emirati contemporary art. And I worked for the Abu Dhabi Festival and the Abu Dhabi Music and Arts Foundation for about 8 years. And for the last 5 years, I work with Her Highness Sheikh Al-Latifa bin Maktoum, bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the founder and director of Tashkeel, which is a phenomenal art and design centre in Dubai that supports and nurtures professional artists and designers living and working in the UAE so they may pursue the profession they trained for.
Not only that, they host talks and workshops and exhibitions annually. They're so much more than just an artist's space, so that's fantastic.
Publications of catalogues there.
Yes, a lot of publications which are all available online, tashkeel.org. Noor, over to you.
I think that we should just keep it as a conversation. It will be more entertaining for the audience than basically making it so organized. Right. But we met at a time where Lisa was working for Canvas magazine. This magazine birthed out of the idea that there was no publications that were writing about modern contemporary Arab art at the time. And if we just look at that as an example, that this magazine existed when there were hardly any galleries, not one, or maybe just one museum, which was a Dubai Museum of History. And then we have the museums in Sharjah, obviously. But the ecosystem in the UAE was reversed. So in the West, you'd have an artist, you'd have someone to commission the artist, you'd have a collector, and then the collections would become museums, and then the auction houses came in. We kind of flipped it all upside down. We had an auction that came in, it was Christie's, and then that brought the art to the forefront, and then the artists trickled in, and then everything was like upside down in a way.
And it was when the art magazine came, when Christie's auction house came, in that early 2000s, those between 2003 and 2007, that it really started to take off, and art became a pursuit, it became a profession, and it also became an economy.
Exactly. I think that's a very key word, the creative economy, the business of the arts, because we had the Emirates Art Society that was from 1980 or 1981, that was established by pioneering artists. And there were artists that went to study abroad in Kuwait or in Egypt, or even like Fatma Luta, who studied here in the States and then lived in Italy. myself, I studied at American University here in Washington, D.C., and I graduated in 2004. Went back to the UAE. Everybody was like, you're crazy. What were you thinking? You should have studied engineering, business. Everybody was making so much money, and I was like with my paintbrush. But also the need for this ecosystem, for the platform of art, pushed people like me. When they introduced me, they said artist and curator. I studied art here. I went on to do my curatorial masters in London because I wanted to support other artists. So I was like, well, I could be an artist, but then I'll just be making art. But we needed more art management. We needed more curatorial managers. We needed people to create opportunities for artists to showcase their work. So I was working with nonprofit spaces like Maraya Art Center, which was in Sharjah. I was working with like art studio galleries like D3 or D5, whatever, Studio D in Al Ghuz. So there was this grassroots movement that started blossoming post, I think, 2007, 6, I'll say. And galleries were opening up. And it was a safe place for people of the region to come and make art, and there was an audience, and it was supply and demand, which I didn't study because I didn't go to business school. So, and you know, with all these buildings and all these houses and all this development that was happening in the country, people were being attracted to move to the UAE from around 200 countries. They were doctors, they were lawyers, they were engineers, but they also were cultural consumers, and they wanted to hang art on their walls, and they wanted to hang art from where they were from, like to add to their home elements of their home. So if you were a Filipino artist making art in Dubai, anybody was collecting your work, not just the Filipinos, you know. So we have James Claw, who's now he was based in New York and now he's in the Philippines, but he launched his career in Dubai.
Yeah, well, what about the commercial in terms of Art Dubai and Art Abu Dhabi? Because just after this, that sort of takes
Do you want to talk about Tashkeel's involvement with the art fairs?
Well, I think we have to remember that the United Arab Emirates is a country that is built on trade. And so, therefore, it was almost instantaneous, going back to what you said earlier, that trade was going to be the ignition for particularly the visual art and the contemporary design scene to take off. And yes, there has been imported brands, so to speak, but along with those imported brands, some of you may have heard of Louvre Abu Dhabi that was opened a few years ago, and there's a Guggenheim Abu Dhabi that is coming. Yes, there are these big projects coming, but similarly, there's phenomenal work coming up through the grassroots as well. And when I say through the grassroots, it's also through the structures that are there for grassroots development, the federal and government arts authorities, the universities that Woodman taught in 2003. The first 2 universities launched their BAs in fine art, the University of Sharjah and Zayed University in Dubai. And I think it was a natural progression then that the art fairs in the very commercial form came. Now, we didn't buy in Art Basel. We didn't buy in Frieze. No. We built our own, and that was Gulf Art Fair, which took shape in 2007.
Exactly, and that fair then changed its name to be known as Art Dubai. And if you think about it, it was an acceleration. So you've got the universities coming up with programs around art and design. You've got galleries opening up. At the same time, you have the auction. At the same time, you've got an art fair that's bringing to this audience of thirsty people that are interested in the arts like me. I can sit and have a coffee with Glenn Lowry, the director of MoMA at the time, where I wouldn't have that access if I was living in Washington, D.C. And when I lived here, the first time I saw art in real life was at the National Art Gallery right across the mall, and I had a tear in my eye. So to say that I was here 22 years ago, and to then say that I worked on the opening of Louvre Abu Dhabi and actually walked into a museum with real art, that is such an emotional experience for me, because we've got hundreds of thousands of kids that go into that museum every day and have access to art and culture, to civilizations and stories from all around the world. And I think this is another role that the art scene is playing. It's also teaching people about other people's religions, their customs, about where they're from, who they are. And this creates this understanding. And I was just at a lunch and we were talking about the Abrahamic Accord. And just right next to the Louvre, Abu Dhabi, they're building a temple, a mosque, and a church right next to each other, designed by Sir David Ajay, who did the African History Museum, the British-Nigerian architect. So what an amazing time to be alive in the UAE, to be a witness. We're witnesses of this development, along with everyone here. So what you see at Folklife Festival is this merge between respect and acknowledging the crafts of the past, but also a showcase of the contemporary.
And in terms of mixing that tradition and contemporary as well, you know, what's exciting at the moment is looking at design and contemporary design. Dubai is the first UNESCO city of design in the Middle East. And as it's being a trading hub, there's great opportunity now to integrate traditional crafts that you see over there, like safifa, khous, the weaving of the palm fronds, integrating that into contemporary designs of furniture and lighting that are not just sold to collectors, but sold in IKEA, sold in Bloomingdale's, sold in the mass market. So that's, I think, our next challenge, is really to export the UAE in terms of its forms of cultural expression.
That's wonderful.
Would you want to add a little bit about the Dubai Design Days and the whole district? Why not?
So I was just going to chime in. Also, it's like part of the vision of the country for 2030 or 2050. Don't judge me. I need to Wikipedia these things. But it is about creating a sustainable, and this word is key, underlined 100 times, a sustainable creative ecosystem that can then enhance the artist to not have to have a job and have a side hustle as being an artist, to really have designers and artists at the forefront. And just to chime in with what Professor Woodman was mentioning, is that the design movement in the UAE, like if you come and you see our local designers, they don't strive to be a local designer. They are designers who the world is their platform. And you know, Khalid Shafar, for example, he went and took a wood cutting class and furniture building courses, and then he did a master's degree in New Zealand to learn how to make, like he makes this furniture from scratch. Like he gets it down and really learns his craft. And this is, I think, what I respect about any form of art. It doesn't mean that you need to have a production company just to produce it, but the fact that you know the nuts and bolts and how to make it, but then if you have to choose to use a production company to mass produce or to do a series, but you know how it was made, you know? So I think it's a really exciting time. I think there's amazing artists and designers coming out of the UAE. I think that we have been participating in the Venice Biennale for 10 years now. We were there for the first edition, and we participate in the Architectural Biennale and the Visual Arts Biennale. We just opened a couple months ago with Mohammed Ahmed Ibrahim, a really amazing Emirati artist from Khor Fakkan. Khor Fakkan is an area in the mountains of the Emirates on, I would say it's the east coast, towards, and he lives behind the mountains. So his dream growing up was to see the sunset, because he would need to go to another city, Sharjah, to see the sunset, because you could only see the sunrise in Khor Fakkan. So he had this amazing artwork. This wasn't in the Biennale, but he had this amazing artwork where he photoshopped a hole in the mountain so that he could imagine a life where he could see the sunset in his town.
And what's great is, yes, there's 200 nationalities that are living and thriving in the UAE. Yes, a majority of them are represented through extremely professional, extremely exciting artists and designers in the art scene. But personally, my value, I really enjoy watching the development of the Emirati artists, and to show people that they didn't just turn up yesterday. Emirati artists have been in practice since the days of the Trucial States, since prior to 1971 and the founding of the UAE. And we are now seeing the zenith of Emirati art, with more and more men and women coming through, dealing with very challenging issues, exploring them through very challenging and technical mediums as well.
Yeah.
You know, you are one of them. You went abroad, you studied, you hoovered up everything that Washington DC could offer you. And, you know, today, 20 years later, I'm not telling your age, you are continuing to give back and mentor and teach the next generation of artists coming up.
I think it's really, I would go back to Professor Woodman to ask him a question about this, because I mentored a lot of young artists. And in university, we're always like, there's a lot of focus on Western art history. I was lucky enough, I had Professor Ron Hawker, I'm giving him a shout out. He made sure that we would learn history of art that was in the region as well, that's relevant to us, even though it wasn't in the curriculum, it wasn't in the books, but he found it very important for us. He's like, why would I just teach you about what's happening in the West? You needed to know what was equivalent to that in your region. And I noticed that a lot of my young artists, they would come out of college, and when they would talk about their practice, they'd be like, well, I was referencing, you know, Donald Judd here, or they would throw out names. And I said, honey, you don't have to give me any justification. You can just be you, and you can produce art that you want to say. If there is a similarity between your practice and another artist, great that you know it, but you don't have to be justifying those artists to justify your work. And I think another thing that we have as a challenge is that a lot of artists don't want to say they're artists until someone else calls them an artist. When I was in the States, I was told I was an artist before I graduated school. So, you know, like, I think that's an interesting mindset, is like, you're an artist and you need to identify and embrace that, and you need to practice because you need to practice. You're not waiting for a commission. You're not waiting for someone to give you an exhibition. You just live and breathe it. And I wanted to ask you about the relevance of the justification.
Well, I'm going to jump on in, because I am an artist, and I do teach my artistry very differently in the UAE. Historically, I include all of our early archaeological sites, which really changes the story. But also for the contemporary art, I include all of our contemporary artists that have done very well, so that the students always aren't having to reference something else outside. Now, the huge change that has recently happened, and you're aware of it, but I actually did see it in front of my eyes. We have a foundation that pays for tutors from Rhode Island School of Design to come and mentor emerging artists. And so our graduates have gone into that. Then after that, if the student was an emerging artist applies to an MFA program, Masters of Fine Arts, and they get in, the foundation has supported their study for 2 years. So then we have our Emirati artists getting an MFA, and they apply to our university, and we hire them.
Yeah.
And I have seen my own students from art history who are studying with a woman Emirati artist, being so inspired by them. So they more earlier on in their career, they are very proud of wanting to become an artist, and they see their own teacher becoming successful and already a superstar. So this change is happening right in front of us, which is so exciting.
I had that experience because I taught at Zayed University for 2 semesters, and in the beginning, the security guards used to stop me and think I'm a student because I don't have the right ID, and I was like, I'm not a student. But the girls would be surprised because they weren't used to having someone from there teaching them, because obviously a lot of our academics are coming from abroad and from the Arab world as well. But it was just interesting because I really had to be tough on them, because I'm also, you know, close in age, but not close in age, or close looking in age. And it was just really exciting because I knew their culture. I knew why they were coming in. And a lot of girls are married and still studying, and not necessarily they're going to go to work, but I would ask them always, why are you doing this? Why are you at school? Why are you taking this degree? And I'll never forget, one girl said to me, she's like, because I want my son to say, my mom has a university degree.
Ah, okay.
Nice.
So, and this is what's amazing, is that there's so many different opportunities of education in the Emirates. So you can go to Sorbonne, you can go to NYU Abu Dhabi, you can go to Sharjah University, American University in Dubai, you can go to Zayed University, Khalifa University that focuses on technology and science. And now we have another school that's focusing on AI, and, you know, the world is changing. But we do a program in Abu Dhabi Art to partner artists with engineers and create artwork together. And just recently, last month, we did a program to partner science students with artists and create NFTs and the whole process of that. So the world is changing and we have to also follow.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
I think going back to that notion of role models as well, I think it's incredibly important. When I first came to the UAE 17 years ago, for someone to stand up and say, I am an artist, was met with some surprise, let's say, and even today, the same issues exist. You know, you raise your child wherever you are in the world, you want them to be a doctor, an engineer, a lawyer. You know, an artist is not necessarily up there in the top 10, but I think over certainly the last 15 years, I've seen a dramatic shift in social attitudes towards the art and towards contemporary art as well. And also to say that art can be play a very important part in your life, regardless of whether you pursue it as a profession. And today at Tashkeel, we are advocating arts-based training. So we're using visual arts-based techniques in other types of training inside companies and also inside public sector, public government departments to help civil servants break out of the box, engage with creative thinking, work in non-hierarchical ways and come up with innovative ideas which will take their businesses or their departments into the next century.
Absolutely. And the government has supported these new future plans for the creative economy as being central to the post-oil economy.
Yeah, I think also we do have something called the Golden Visa for Culture and Arts. I think interesting. So when you live in the UAE, you're either a national like me or a resident. And the residency visa is dependent on where you work, and it's usually a yearly visa. It's renewable with your contract. But the Golden Visa is a really way to celebrate people that are significantly valuable to us in art and culture. And you can apply for that visa, and it's a 10-year visa. So, and this 10-year visa gives you all these different benefits, like when you come into the airport, there's like a fast track for you, and just a way of, like, I think, celebrating the talent that does exist in the UAE.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do we want to open to questions? They look curious.
Yeah,
Maybe they're bored of our voices.
No, I was just going to do that. Any questions? Yes, please. Yeah.
Oh, you get a microphone.
It's hot.
First of all, I just heard you say that the state is supporting the arts. To what degree? I mean, you were talking about not having to do a side hustle if you were an artist. Is that a reality?
No, it's not reality yet, but we're getting closer and closer.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's difficult to be an artist anywhere in the world. I've been in residencies here across the US. So basically, there are some benefits that we have. First of all, education free for nationals. And if you're really smart and you get really good grades, you can get scholarships. So I got scholarships to study, and that was because my grades were really high.
Are we talking about high school, postgrad,
college,
postgraduate?
Everything.
Okay.
So that's one thing that really helps, right? Because you don't have student loans and all of that stuff. Then we've got fellowship programs, like the one that Professor Woodman mentioned, the Sheikh Salama Fellowship. It's competitive, you have to apply, but once you get in, you have the opportunity that if you do really well in the fellowship, that you could get offered a full scholarship to RISD after and do your master's there. Yeah. So there are these benefits. They also have spaces like Tashkeel, even though you pay money for your studio, it's pretty
subsidized.
It's subsidized. It's very, what would you call it?
It's subsidized. I mean, and we try and create income generation opportunities for professional artists and upskill them so they become teaching artists. They can engage with retailers and provide digital prints of their work to Virgin Megastore or to Bloomingdale's. So really giving them an opportunity to not only develop their practice and their research, but also their business skills as well, so they can live, thrive and survive as artists.
Most artists work within the arts. So I used to work with the Louvre Abu Dhabi. I'm working with an art fair now. But a lot of the artists work within the cultural domain, in the admin side, in the programming side and things like that. So we're like big family, like we're family. I mean, this group that's out here today, a lot of people, I call them my art family because literally the last 15 years, they've been with me everywhere for every event. And at the time, you have to think that 15 years ago when all of this was bustling, we needed every man, woman, and dog to attend the event to make it a success. And now before we used to like have one event in a month and we'd all go to it and we're like 200 people. Now we have every evening 3, 4, 5, 8 events across the Emirates. We don't know where to go. We can't catch up even. So it's kind of like a race. And COVID really helped us slow down a bit because we're not just active in the UAE. We're very active regionally. So we'd all be going to an event in Pakistan if there was a biennale, or we'd be in Saudi Arabia for an exhibition, or we'd all come to the Venice Biennale, and it's like a whole tribe of us like travel together and represent the UAE in all different forms. If we are like gallery owners, or we're curators or writers or researchers or professors or students. And I think the universities do a lot to, like, even with Folklife, they brought out a group of students here. And so what an amazing experience to come to DC, to see all these museums that are open for free, to meet people like you and exchange. Like, the whole point of this festival is this dialogue.
Absolutely.
So the next question is, I see we've got 3 spokespeople up here. 2 of you are women, and I wanted to know very specifically, if you're allowed to talk about it, what the situation is for the women in the UAE. I specifically have not gone there, in that